Hello everyone, my name is Paul and welcome back to the new news. I hope that everyone is having a wonderful day. It's Saturday, I hope you guys got to enjoy it. There's actually a little bit of a festival right down the street from where I'm at, so I'm sorry if you're overhearing any weird music, but you probably shouldn't. Hopefully the internet's also fixed today. I did a little bit of work this afternoon trying to get that at least fixed on my side. I know that there were some problems yesterday, so I want to apologize for that once again. But most importantly, I hope that you are safe, that your friends and your family are safe, and if not, I really do hope that you guys find that safety and security in the very near future. But we have pretty decent amount of news going on today. You can tell, obviously, there's a lot of stuff happening throughout the world. There's a lot of fighting. There's a lot of conflicts going on, major and minor. There is a lot of drought and famine and some pretty terrible stuff overall. So luckily, though, you guys have made this a pretty awesome community, and we continue to strive to be the news that gives back. So we in the description, you're going to find a bunch of different fundraisers and foundations, organizations we've gone through and we've vetted that you guys can donate to. Not only do we look to make sure, one, that those are legitimate organizations, but two, all of those 80% or more of the donations actually go to the programs, meaning they actually go towards helping people and not towards those administration's costs and those salaries. So please be sure to go check that out and check out all those different organizations. If you want to support Ukraine, of course you can, but I please implore you to check out the different organizations for other regions as well, because they are affected, and unfortunately they're not getting nearly as much kind of publicity regarding their situations. So please check them out too. If you can't give a lot, give a little. And if you can't give anything at all, at least, give us a like, subscribe, let your friends know about us, because we want to be able to help people and make a meaningful difference in people's lives throughout the world. And the only way we can do that is with your guys' support. Doing that stuff, it helps us reach more people, and the more people can come here, enjoy the news the way that we want, the way that we do it, but also can be part of something a little bit bigger and help people throughout the world, which I think is pretty noble. So other than that, let's dive right into the news here. So of course, we're going to jump right into our special report here in Ukraine. There's a pretty decent amount of stuff happening, and the first thing's pretty interesting to start with, and that's because there's a new member of the Free Russian Legion. So this man's name is Igor Voloblev, and he is the former vice president of the Russian bank Gazprom. Now, Gazprom is a pretty large organization. That's actually the main Russian bank in which foreign currency is exchanged into rubles for things like your gas. So if you live in Germany and you're reliant on Russian gas, that your government is paying this bank in order to get that foreign currency exchanged. So pretty big deal. But anyway, he joined the Free Russian Legion, and he's also imploring any other Russians with a dislike for Putin or the government to do the same. Let's take a look.
Игорь, ну как? Супер. Мечты сбываются. Я теперь служу в Легионе Свободы России. Парни из России, если вы ненавидите путинский режим и хотите, чтобы Россия стала свободной, демократической страной, присоединяйтесь.
Short and sweet, but I mean, when you start talking about people that big, and it's reaching people that big, you're right, because you gotta think Russia's cut off, right? No, from the news, but the movement is there, even if it's not open in a lot of ways. Maybe you're not going to see these huge protests in Moscow or St. Petersburg necessarily, but it's an authoritarian regime, but people are going to find ways to resist. And I mean, obviously it reached him, and he thought this was a good idea. So how many other people in Russia has it reached as well? As we jump down here into the southern part of the country and the southeastern part of Ukraine, we could see that there was a Ukrainian artillery strike on a Russian position in Choslovske. So the Ukrainian artillery strike actually hit a number of logistics vehicles in this facility right here, right where the marker is. This was geolocated to this facility. They are using this as basically a logistical base at this point. It is relatively close to the front lines. While our front lines may be near where the current battle positions are, they aren't exact. So please bear that in mind, especially when you're talking about these large swaths of open terrain. But it's a pretty... they did speed up the footage here just because otherwise we'd be sitting here for 15, 20, 30 minutes just watching artillery coming in, which for some of us wouldn't be a big problem, but they did speed up the footage on this, so let's take a look. And so it does have copyright music, but we can take a look. You can see these Russian vehicles, they're pouring into this facility here. This is apparently from a drone that someone sped up the footage. And of course, I mean, of course they got their military vehicles, but there's also a lot of civilian vehicles that have been commandeered for the war just because they didn't have enough trucks to begin with. But we can see, here comes that Russian or that Ukrainian artillery. You can see where the first round landed short, second round landed short, and that's walking it on target. So they're bracketing them with this, and they're walking those rounds under the target, and now they get a hit. And now they can fire for effect, which is where they're going to start bringing in a lot more rounds onto the target. And that's actually how artillery works. Now, it's not precise. It is called indirect fire. But you can get close enough, and that's really all you need. Because you got to think, even if they didn't hit directly onto the target, all the shrapnel and everything off of the high explosives, that's going to be, you know, that's going to be going into the engine bay. Like, that's just hot fragments of metal going, you know, way past the speed of sound that is just, you know, slamming into your engine bay and cutting your hoses and your fuel lines and everything else. So you don't need a direct hit. But looks like pretty effective artillery usage on the side of the Ukrainians. As we jump down here, we can actually check out here in Kramatorsk, which it looks like the Donetsk has actually been put into the Dark Ages, essentially. And the reason I say that is because due to the Russian military actions, there is no electricity in the whole of the Donetsk region. And that's coming from the press service of the Kramatorsk City Council. So pretty... When you're saying there is no electricity in the entire region, I mean, you'd find that almost hard to believe, but you have to understand how many targets, infrastructure targets, and I'm talking things like electricity lines, gas plants, oil lines, water lines. I mean, just think of how many places have been shelled and bombed or purposely targeted, or, you know, they hit it on accident. I mean, that's the entire city of Mariupol right now is because they shelled it so much into oblivion that they literally were hitting gas lines and water mains all throughout the city unintentionally, and now the city is just a massive cesspool. I mean, the water lines are all busted. There's cholera. There's no clean drinking water. There's no electricity. I mean, that's despite to say there's absolutely no houses anyway, but that's, you know, kind of what's going on. And Kramatorsk and the rest of the Donetsk is really in the same situation at this point. But that doesn't stop Ukrainian forces from continuing the fight, as we can see here, where there's a pretty intense firefight right here along the SEVERODONETSK River. We do not know where this is happening exactly. We just know that this is along the SEVERODONETSK River. Basically, they're on opposite sides of the river, engaging each other. Ukrainian forces did withdraw from certain areas on the other side of the SEVERODONETSK, and that's just because their positions, such as up in Lyman, they were getting heavily engaged, and from there, it was just better to fall back to defensive positions, and you get to see those in this footage. Well, maybe not a whole lot, but we still get to take a look. So let's see.
Мертвый он! Трима.
So it doesn't look like a lot, but there's a lot going on, and that's just the reality of it. Combat is essentially a lot of basic actions all coming together, and that is, I mean, he's just running back and forth grabbing RPGs. Doesn't sound like a whole lot, but you gotta think about what kind of a punch an RPG has. That's a lot. That's a lot of firepower he's throwing down range, and that's not something that's very easy to fire in like an obscured position, because first of all, you got the back blast coming off of it. So if not only do you have to avoid shooting a tree or something on accident and this thing detonating in your face once it gets to an arming distance, but you got to worry about the back blast where it's going to ricochet off some of those trees, especially in a really heavily wooded area. It shouldn't be too much of a problem, but it's still dangerous. And you're also basically having to expose yourself, pretty heavily to fire something like this. So you can obviously hear there's pretty intense combat going on. And that's not, I would say it's the worst job of the war, but that's definitely not my prime pick if I was going to be anybody. But that's, that just shows you pretty heavy fighting here along this front. And that actually brings us into SEVERODONETSK, where we have even more intense footage. So there's extremely heavy street fighting inside of SEVERODONETSK, especially when you're talking about in and around areas such as the industrial zone, which is down here. Pretty extensive industrial zone at that. But at least according to the Ukrainian mayor of SEVERODONETSK, about 1/3 of the city is in Ukrainian control at this point, which is pretty, I'd say we probably give it just a little bit more, but we haven't changed the battle lines all that much at this point. And they also said that, or basically that, hey, they were entrenched. This is from yesterday. They were entrenched in the SEVERODONETSK industrial district. There was heavy fighting going on there. We showed some of that. But this is first-person, up-close, personal combat footage. So let's take a look.
Стоп! Пацаны, спускайтесь! Мы не можем спуститься, блядь! Нас валяют! Есть контакт? Чи ти проти? Третій!
That's the kind of fighting that is causing such a high casualty rate. MOUT is, like I've said before, is probably the hardest type of fighting you can do. MOUT stands for Military Operations in Urban Terrain, MOUT, and it is immensely difficult, and it is immensely it's very deadly. It's just, there's no two ways around it. You saw that in Mariupol. The entire battle, how many casualties were being taken. I mean, there's a possibility that, as many as 6,000 Russian troops were killed in the Battle of Mariupol alone. And right now, Ukraine is claiming like 32,000. Well, those are pretty unconfirmed, right? Like we're never going to actually know that, at least not for a very long time. That, if true, it's pretty significant losses in just a single battle. When you are planning to assault a city, you're planning for 80% or more casualties. And that is pretty universal as a rule. That is exactly why right before the battle started, and when everyone's talking about, the Battle of SEVERODONETSK is getting ready to begin, they're like, the Russians are going to take extremely heavy casualties to take the city of SEVERODONETSK. Well, yeah, the Battle of Fallujah, Battle of Baghdad, Barzhov, Sangin, you name it, first or second Battle of Fallujah, take your pick. It really doesn't matter. You could also look at more recent events when you're talking about Raqqa or Mosul as well. The battle for Mosul was absolutely bloody. Some rates or some units in the Iraqi army, such as the Golden Lions Division, had an attrition rate of like 93%. And you saw that, like I said, the Battle of Fallujah really illustrates that too. And so that's the kind of fighting that you're looking at throughout this. And it's not and it is a little bit better as the defender, but not by much. Because Ukraine especially, you're basically, Russians are attacking and Ukrainians are holding a defensive position, but Ukraine is also trying to retake the city at the same time. And so both of them are conducting, trying to outmaneuver each other and conducting pretty much continual offenses against each other in this region, or in this city. So it's causing a high attrition rate on both sides. So you're going to see extremely high casualties for both the Russians and the Ukrainians. The Ukrainians, I would say, are probably a little bit better armed, at least on a man-to-man level. Like you can see here, like he's got like at least a medium range engagement. Like he has a ACOG sight, or advanced combat optical gun sight is what it stands for. But he's got like an RCO, like an actual gun sight. He's got flashlight, right, mounted onto his stuff. It looks like he's got actually that looks like the end of the scope, but he's got pretty good loadout for at least his weapon system. And we also see these other troops too, and they're pretty kitted out. See if I can find a picture here. Yeah, like this guy's got suppressors. He's got a scope on it, right? The Russians are pretty much running plain Jane AKs. The AK-12 is pretty limited. You're seeing a lot of AK-74s. Some of the older iterations of the 74 at this point had no real optics mounted to this, no real attachments mounted to this to improve for this fighting. Limited supply of suppressors, really limited only to the Spetsnaz and some of the VDV. You're seeing they're really not rocking any night vision. We've seen plenty of Ukrainian troops rocking night visions, even if it's just the PVS-14s, which are the single eye lens, optical mounts that were used by basically all U.S. forces back in the 2000s. Some U.S. forces still use them now, including the Marine Corps, of course. But that kind of being kitted out, those small differences, means that this guy that this video is being filmed from is going to be able to engage accurately a lot farther than, say, a Russian soldier is going to. So while the Russian soldier might be able to put the rounds in this guy's area at 400 meters, let's say 500 meters, the Russian has to be within 300 meters to really get any precision shots on target. This guy's going to be able to pick him off at 500 meters, probably no problem, just because he has the better optic. And in a situation like this, where it's a 1-to-1 power parity, those very small differences mean everything. That's why those major shipments of incoming artillery and everything else is such a big deal. And we'll actually get into some of that and some of the issues that Ukraine and really NATO countries are facing because of it. But that's not the only thing that happened in Severodonetsk, and that's because the Azot plant actually was destroyed. Roughly 800 Ukrainians were actually inside the plant, about roughly 600 employees and 200 other citizens of Severodonetsk. It's a pretty large plant. It's has really thick walls. I mean, it's an industrial building, right? But it was struck by Russian forces. We're not quite sure what the ordnance was, and that actually also started an oil fire, which ended up completely destroying the building. And you can take a look at that here. So this was the plant prior, and that is the plant now. So we don't know casualties at this point. That's probably a pretty long way off from knowing casualties, but this kind of fighting is extremely brutal. It's going to be extremely brutal for the civilian populace, for anyone left in the city, and it's going to be very much a back and forth, constantly changing a situation. So don't expect this to be resolved anytime soon. It's not going to be a quick victory for either side. As you drop down here further south, so there's a right way and a wrong way to do a lot of things. And as I was talking about before, there's this thing with with anti-armor weapons, it's called a backblast. And what this is basically an overpressure, and it can, you have to be mindful of it, I should say. Even the Javelin, right, which is it's purposely built to have a very low backblast. It has a very low signature with its backblast, especially. You still have to be mindful about the size of the room you're shooting it in. Even though you can shoot it indoors, you need to pick a pretty sizable room. If you shoot something, in a very confined space, which there are certain models to say the AT4 has a confined space variant that we've seen here in Ukraine. Those you still have to have about 75 meters behind you, so that way the backblast and the overpressure from it doesn't end up causing damage to you, because this stuff will turn your essentially insides into jelly, is the best way I can describe it. That is what happens when you get hit with a massive amount of backblast. That's why whenever you see videos of guys running behind their buddy who's shooting the RPG and it blasts him in the face, why that guy never gets up again is because of the backblast. And as we can see here, this guy is not very mindful of his backblast. This is a Russian soldier somewhere along this front. Looks like he's firing, I'm going to say an RPG 26 or 27. And he shoved the back end of the tube right into his hood. So, I can't imagine this went well for him if he fired, because you gotta think, like, the massive amount of, first of all, it's probably gonna blow open his top, right? Like, it's gonna blow open this jacket. Like, this jacket is ruined. Whatever's left is gonna be hanging by his little belt here, his little molly belt, and some of that's going to get redirected into back up and into the top, up into his helmet and into his ears and everything. So he's probably not having a great day. I don't believe this would kill him, because this isn't going to hold up very well when he fires this. His hood's not. But like I said, there's a right way and a wrong way. And if you're making rookie mistakes like this, because this is something that's just unbelievably this guy was not trained how to use this, essentially, is what this is. I'm not saying, it maybe he was, but not very well, because I'd never seen anyone do anything like this. Also, I want to point out something else. This guy has absolutely no kit on. Like, that I can physically see. He has his belt. He does not have a vest. He does not have a bulletproof vest. At least that I can see, unless this is covering it, which I don't think so. Then this guy is not even wearing a bulletproof vest. He literally has a helmet, and he's got a belt and nothing else, and he's shoving the back end of his RPG 26 into his own hood. Way to go, sir. Give that man a medal, I guess. That's about all I can say. Over here, this is the Coke plant over here in Avdiivka. Avdiivka is a Ukrainian-held city, but there was a massive, and I do mean massive, explosion. It was visible from Donetsk over the city, and reportedly Russian troops ended up hitting the Coke plant here. We do not know with what, but just take a look at this thing. This must have been like a FOAB or something, which is that's the Russian response to the Moab, mother of all bombs. Well, Russia made the father of all bombs. And this thing is just massive. Just take a look. Now it's a pretty big mushroom cloud. Now this doesn't mean it's like a nuclear strike or anything. Don't think that. Any explosion large enough makes a mushroom cloud. That's just how that works. It's just how explosives work, and how air pressure carries up everything. That's why you see mushroom clouds form when a volcano erupts, because they have a massive amount of explosive power and there's a lot of heat and debris rising up. So it's not like I don't think this was like a nuclear strike. Otherwise, we'd have a lot more things to be worried about than whether or not I'm going to give a news thing tonight. But that is the situation. With that, we do not know the situation there in Avdiivka. We just know what's happening, at least from a distance. Similar to kind of that, Vyruska, I believe is the name, Vyruska, that we talked about yesterday, that got wiped off the map. We don't have any further news on that either. Let's go over here to the Kherson Oblast. Congratulations. You have out of 400, somewhere between 400 and 5,000 or 500,000 people that are living in this occupied region of Kherson. You have issued a grand total of 23 passports for Russia. I don't think that this was a terrible decision on the part of Russian forces. Because the occupational government, they got a grand total of 23 applications to get a Russian passport, and they're planning on holding a referendum for Kherson to become its own people's republic, or to just join Russia in general. And this does not exactly send a strong signal that there's a great bunch of people here who want to support being an independent Russian-speaking province, or to join the Russian Federation. Once again, about 1 million people live here. Somewhere between 400 and 5,000 people left, so that leaves, about 400 to 500,000 people that's still in the Kherson Oblast. And you issued 23. You got double digits. You couldn't even make it over 100. And you have control of this region. You couldn't have even forced people to get these passports. So that's pretty insane. And reportedly, most of them are Russian collaborators too. And you think that Russia would, maybe not want to post this? No, they did. Right off of Russian media. 23 whole passports. Congratulations. They are chanting this as a victory. No. And this is also coming as reports are coming in regarding the ongoing counteroffensive in the Kherson Oblast, which reportedly Ukrainian forces are less than 20 kilometers from Kherson itself and are currently on the offensive on at least 4 different fronts. They have 4 different axes of advance here along this front line in the Kherson Oblast. They're pushing the Russians, and they're pushing them hard right now. And they're going to be championing. They issued a whole 23 passports. Pretty sure every post office in the United States probably issues more passports in a day than the Kherson Oblast has so far. Jump over here, back onto Snake Island. And Snake Island is still in Russian hands, but they're also adding more air defense systems. We're seeing more. It looks like they've been adding TOS systems to this. There's actually some satellite imagery of the island, and you can actually see where there are some emplacements for anti-air defenses and additional ones here. The thing is that we don't know if that's exactly going to do a whole lot, but we do know that the Ukrainian Air Force has really been giving Snake Island hell for quite a while now, using Bayraktar drones. Su-25s did some bombing runs. There's not exactly a whole lot left on Snake Island. It just serves as an outpost and a listening post, and probably at the end of the war, some kind of a negotiating chip, because being this small of an island and having, look at the shores, there's no real good place to conduct an amphibious landing. There's just not a whole lot of great ground to do something like that. It would be very difficult for Ukrainian troops to retake the island itself without just bombing everything into oblivion and starting over. But there's also, apparently, coming out of Sevastopol, a new theory as to why raptors went extinct. And the reason being is, instead of a meteor, it may have been a TB2 Bayraktar drone. Take a look at this. This is a Raptor assault boat, or a Raptor patrol boat. And it's used by the Russian Federation. That's what it looks like once a Bayraktar drone gets done with it. So this is used heavily by the Russian Federation to conduct patrols in and around coastal areas, major ports, up and down rivers, that kind of thing. They're not the heaviest armed thing, but they're also used as an assault boat, so they can transport troops. We can take a look at the inside here. So this is the seat mountings for the inside of this thing. As the inside of the boat in general, and you can see this is all armored and covered. Right? Not anymore. This thing is gone. Everything is gone in here. There was no, I don't think there's any hope of surviving anything like that. But yeah, that's pretty rough. So that may be the actual reason, ladies and gentlemen, that Raptors went extinct. But that's actually it for inside of Ukraine. A lot of small developments, a lot of really intense combat, especially when you're talking about the Donbass. But that is kind of the way things are going right now. Information is a little bit limited, especially as power supplies are getting cut off, which in turn cuts off your access to the internet. So unless you have like a Starlink system or you have data on your phone or something, it's difficult to get that information out to begin with. But there's pretty extensive fighting going on throughout the Donbass, and maybe while we aren't seeing a whole lot of it today, that's just kind of how the war goes. And we're also looking for other stuff too, so a lot of stuff just can't be vetted or verified at all. So other than that, there is plenty of stuff outside of the Ukraine though that does have to deal with the war. And so we're actually going to jump over here and we're going to take a look at the Bryansk region, where a mysterious fire causes major losses for the Russian logistical line. Bryansk region has several different military installations and a lot of forward operations areas for the Russian forces. But this is one of the reasons why you're seeing Ukrainian forces engage areas along the border with artillery strikes, despite the fact they've pushed the Russians out. They're not pushing troops into these areas, but they certainly are, at least not to our knowledge, but they certainly are conducting artillery strikes, and we can see some of that here. So let's take a look. An army moves on its stomach, and if you can't feed your troops because you don't have the trucks to transport that food, then there's no hope for you in winning a war. Your guys need your forces need food, they need fuel, they need ammunition, they need medical supplies, they need transportation, they need all sorts of stuff. Batteries, if they have anything that's electronic they got to use, which is, it's the 21st century, so a lot of modern warfare requires batteries. And so Russia didn't start the war with enough logistical vehicles to begin with. First of all, they had to pull a lot of logistical vehicles out of storage, and they've refitted them and put them into action. They've also, as we saw at the beginning of the war, while that process was ongoing, we saw them commandeer a metric ton of civilian vehicles that had less load capacity, but it didn't matter. They needed them to begin with. And they made a lot of great memes, but something like this, I mean, you can see, and it just carries from one to the other. Something like this is a major blow to Russian forces, because each one of these vehicles, you can see some of these vehicles pretty burned up, but each one of these vehicles is necessary to complete a task. These, for instance, look like the recovery vehicles. So if you need to recover a damaged vehicle in order to fix it and put it into storage, that's not happening with these things. That's just not going to be the case. These things are now destroyed, and these are equipment that is very specialized. There's very limited numbers of them. They're going to produce a lot of transport vehicles. They're going to produce a lot of tankers, because they need fuel to keep the military moving. But more specialty vehicles like this, definitely a lot less. Ambulances are going to be less. Recovery vehicles are going to be less. Any kind of maintenance and portable maintenance units, command centers, mobile command centers, anything like that, you're going to have a lot less of them, a lot less limited production run, because you're not expecting to take severe losses on them. And these are absolutely catastrophic losses to these vehicles. So there is no hope of recovery for any of these. These things aren't probably even worth their scrap metal, because the metal is now weak. jump up here into Moscow. And the Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs celebrates Russia Day with a very interesting tweet. Take a look at this. Well, the Crusades, you have the First of all, this came before this, but that's neither here nor there. But Napoleon, the Nazis, and then whoever's going to fill this box, they would put Ukraine there, but that means anybody in the West, NATO as a whole, essentially. So interesting tweet nonetheless, but I don't think it's, what are they going to say at this point? But my favorite point when it comes to Russia is actually not even in Russia. It's actually in Lithuania. And the prime minister of Lithuania is a savage. So we're gonna take a look at this real quick. I gotta show you. So this is Russian state media, right? And this is what they're talking about, and this is their, the subtitles. They're correct. We have our in-house translator who checks all this stuff. But just take a look at what's being said, and then we're gonna go through his response real quick.
Прибалты просто в инфаркте. Тут один прибал стал хамить, говорит, если вы денонсируете признание 91 года, если Россия отзовет признание независимости Литвы в 91 году, Литва аннулирует Поляновский договор 1634 года и потребует, чтобы Путин подчинился власти Владислава IV. И здесь они переходят на карканье. И вернул все оккупированные территории Великому княжеству. Смоленск – это Литва. Есть нюанс. Когда депутат Сейма орет, его никто не слышит. А если Путин даже шепотом, вот просто, тихонечко фразу произнесет, ох, как мир может вздрогнуть. Поэтому, слышь, депутат, говоришь, Смоленск это Литва? Подъезжай, забирай. Подъезжай, забирай.
Come and get it. His response, this guy just invited me to invade Russia. No thanks, I've already got a washing machine with a nice big smiley emoji. And to go one step further, because I didn't notice this at first, he tags the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Russia. He tags the Ministry of Foreign Affairs for Russia, and then he tags the company that he bought his washing machine from. Now, if there's not a greater response, it's kind of funny, when you're talking about something so serious, right? But you can't help but you have to have a dark sense of humor sometimes, especially in a situation like this. And this guy's got it. I mean, some of the stuff that we saw coming out of Kyiv, right at the beginning of the war. I mean, they're stealing. Literally, like we saw, like a Disney, like a Disney blanket on top of a tank with a Russian tanker. Like we've seen, stuff getting taken out of, like he said, literal washing machines getting taken by Russian forces and thrown into like BMPs in the back of their Urals, and it's just insane. But at least he's got some humor for it. Oh, jeez. So that's my favorite bit of news coming out of Lithuania. But unfortunately, the good news doesn't keep going, though, and that's because of Berlin. And Berlin, specifically Chancellor Scholz, reportedly is blocking Spain from giving Ukraine valuable Leopard tanks. So because the Leopard series of main battle tank, which is probably one of the greatest main battle tanks in the world, mind you, is German made and German produced, in order for another country to either sell or give away some of that arsenal that it received under contract from Germany, they have to have Germany's permission. Germany did this very same thing to Estonia when Estonia wanted, which is up here in the Baltics, when Estonia wanted to give artillery systems and other weapons of war to Ukraine in order to fight Russia. Germany blocked that as well. So this isn't the first thing. Germany's under a lot of political scrutiny. They're under a massive amount of scrutiny when it comes to supporting Ukraine. At first, they were only going to give protective equipment, body armors and helmets, and everyone else in the world was like, whoa, like, we're sending artillery systems, right? So, first of all, the massive amounts of that already promised aid, from the body armor to M270 MLRS systems, which we've shown here on the channel regarding, have all been delayed, at least partially or in totality, by Germany. And keep in mind that this is Germany, right? Like, Germany's right here. They could put it on a train. They could ship it across Poland, which would have absolutely no problem with this, all things considered. And it would end up in Lviv at some point and then transported to the front, or whatever the logistical lines for that are, right? Like, Germany to Ukraine is a puddle jump. The United States is filling C17 Globemasters and C3 Galaxies with stuff in places all over the United States, whether that's Kansas, maybe it's coming out of Wright-Patterson Airfield there in Dayton. Who knows? Doesn't matter. They're shipping this stuff across the Atlantic Ocean into Europe, flying them in to Poland, and then shipping them across the border in massive amounts. Most of the time, the stuff probably is getting there before the United States even announces they're sending it officially. Like, most of it's probably already in Poland at the very least before we even hear about it, right? But Germany, according to them, needs to produce a software update for their M270s. They don't have enough body armor to give them. So it's... Germany has had a 180-degree turn when it comes to their political and military ideologies. Because they were essentially a pacifist since they were absolutely destroyed during World War II. They've basically been pacifists ever since. And they've had a complete 180 in political ideology because of the war, and they've had a complete 180 when it comes to supplying things militarily because of the war. That doesn't mean that problems still don't linger. Germany is in a very precarious situation. Germany heavily relies on Russian gas. And while everyone says, well, just turn off the gas supplies, well, it's summer now, almost, right? It's June. And you got about 6 months or less. You probably have about 4 or 5 before winter sets in and people are freezing. Germany's one of the biggest economies in Europe. But a lot of those industrial bases require Russian gas. You can't just turn on the faucet. And these things, I mean, that's infrastructure. Those pipelines, that infrastructure has been built over decades. You can't just turn that off in a couple of months, which is probably some of the heat that Berlin is feeling. So while I do understand to an extent that there are certain things that make it very difficult, they're having, such a drastic shift in ideology takes some time to really get the momentum fully going, no matter what the situation is. You weren't expecting to do this. You could argue that. You could argue political pressures because of self-interest. But push comes to shove, this stuff's already promised, and you have other countries that are shipping things halfway across the globe when all it takes for you is to flatbed it on a train. I see at least a little bit of a problem personally with the situation. And that's my personal opinion on it. But that's just, I just see an issue with it personally. Something just don't seem right with me or with that. But with that, we're going to start jumping down here into the Middle East. And we start in here with Armenia, where the protests yet still continue in Yerevan. It's almost like every day for the past month and a half we've said protests continue in Yerevan. But they do. The political situation there is not extremely great. And right now they're at the Prosecutor General's office of Armenia. So that's kind of what we're looking at here.
Ordu'nun
Арен! Николь Работин! Моя Виктор Усталес Бацин! Бацин!
So there's about 50,000 protesters, at least, that we last heard from the opposition in Yerevan. So pretty significant number of protests, pretty wide-scale protests. For about a day, they shifted towards Russia, anti-Russian protests, and now they're back to being anti-government protests there in Armenia itself. And as we jump over here, we finally get a little bit of news coming out of Syria. Not a whole lot, but at least a tiny snippet. It doesn't seem like the war has actually gone into full-fledged, that imminent invasion that was supposed to occur this week. Still not seeing it, at least officially. We're not seeing it for the independent sources at all. But there is a little bit of fighting. A pro-Turkish militia actually fired on the positions of the PKK near the tower of Syrietl, which is a mobile communication in the village of Kaluvania. Sorry, I even though I spent some time there, I still can't pronounce it. Which is in the Manbij region, and they're saying that there's a lot of wounded Kurds. We can't confirm that. All we know though is that there is in fact some fighting in the region. Yeah, it looks like Syria, but that's kind of just the situation right now. We really don't know. We're not going to know a whole lot until this thing actually starts kicking off, and that is saying that we get a whole bunch of information to begin with, because the war zone there really doesn't leave a lot of infrastructure to do a whole lot with, especially when it comes to posting things independently. So we'll just have to see. And jump down here into Israel real quick, and multiple buses were set ablaze, 18 in fact, at a bus station. There were no injuries, but the cause of the sudden fire really isn't known. Right now they're suspecting it's arson, so we can take a look at that.
You know them.
So as you can tell, that's no small fire. Pretty dangerous stuff actually, especially with all that gasoline in those units or diesel. That's probably what you heard cooking off those explosions is what it sounded like. Obviously the metal's warping too, but pretty massive fire for 18 buses. As we move over into Iraq, we actually jump over here into the Diyala Governorate, where we actually see at least one tribal militia leader and was killed, and 4 others were injured when a vehicle was blown up by the Islamic State near the village of Kanata. So this is in the Diyala province. The Islamic State is still very active throughout the entire region. In fact, they're very active globally, and we'll even get into some of that. But they are constantly fighting with militia leaders, whether that's Kataib Hezbollah, which is an Iranian-backed militia that is also fighting the Islamic State. They actually have their own checkpoints aside from the government checkpoints. Whether that's the actual Iraqi government or whether that's your own tribal militias throughout the region. The Peace Corps is another one, or the Peace Brigades, I should call them, because the Peace Corps is something completely different. But the Peace Brigades. So that's the Martyrs Brigade. That all of that stuff is kind of what's going on here. They're saying that according to some local sources, the government troops were also fired on in the same district. It's a complete possibility. They're still fighting the Islamic State all over the place in the country. Just because they don't hold any territory anymore does not mean they are not still a danger. They are still, in fact, extremely violent. We jump up over here, we see some intra-fighting here in Afghanistan, in Dakar. So this is between the Uzbek Taliban, who, I mean, being right on the border with Uzbekistan, right over here. So that, they supported the Afghani Taliban, and they kind of have, some of their militants are in this region too. But the Pashtuns, this is really big in Pashtun territory. There's multiple different ethnicities and culture groups inside of Afghanistan. It's not all just like Arabs. A lot of these are other groups of people. The Pashtun are probably the largest other group of people in Afghanistan. And the Pashtuns actually went to detain several militants who they suspected as having links to the Islamic State. The Uzbek Taliban did not agree that they did, and what ended up unfolding is an actual shootout. Reportedly civilians were killed, but we honestly don't know. Let me take a look. It should be noted that there are entire parts of Afghanistan that really nobody realistically controls, and nobody has controlled. There are entire parts of Afghanistan, especially when you talk about the tribal regions. You're talking about the mountainous tribal regions of Pakistan and Afghanistan. Is it technically within their countries? Yeah. Are they technically in control of it? Yeah. But do they really? No. Especially when you're talking about the tribal regions, you're talking about independent small groups of tribal leaders who have very loose alliances, really don't go any kind of political route. The U.S. never really had any sway over them. The Taliban have never really had too much of sway over them. They really just kind of they really don't care who's in charge. They just kind of want to do their own thing. And so when you're talking about Pashtuns, especially in these regions, I mean, these are usually guys pretty independent from what's going on otherwise politically in the grand scale of things. They are just care about what's going on in their village, and the Islamic State being such a really big deal and really affecting everybody. Even the small cell of Islamic State, or the threat of the Islamic State, puts a lot of nerves and tensions into relations in any of these regions, especially when you're talking about very small tribal communities that really can't afford to be fighting the Islamic State or at any level. So squash that before it even starts is kind of the mentality there, at least with my limited understanding of the situation. As we jump back down here into Singapore, we can see that the ShangriLa Summit actually reinforces a 51-year-old defense pact. So basically, the top officials of Malaysia, Singapore, Australia, New Zealand, and Britain all said on Saturday that the 51-year-old five-power defense arrangement, or the FPDA pact, was solid, relevant, and crucial in managing the rising tensions in the region. Basically, we held a summit, we talked about it on both sides, and the way things are now are just fine. Nothing should change. They will meet the challenge, as they have for the past 51 years. Now, the tensions in the region are very complex, especially with China attempting to grow its sphere of influence. It's really affecting a lot of countries. It's putting a lot of tensions on Western powers. It's putting a lot of tensions on New Zealand, on Australia, on the United States, Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, of course. It probably bears a lot of the brunt of it. But you're talking about very much a division between East and West. Very similar ideology to the division between East and West with Russia. It just happens to be on the Pacific side of it. Some people, including myself, even in the past, have drawn a relation between Russia and China being the new axis of evil. Could you go to that extent? Probably not really, considering Japan took all of this out by force and then also committed, the rape of Nanking. But that's they have very similar ideologies, at least politically. They have very big anti-Western sentiments, and they're both looking to expand their spheres of influence. So, and they're both very militarized, very authoritarian countries. So Russia and China get along well to begin with, and China is basically trying to do what Russia is failing to do, except they're doing it in the Pacific, and instead of doing it militarily, they're doing it very much politically and even more so economically, with a lot of military contracts and structural contracts with different nations, including upgrading ports, rail systems, cities. They have an entire city surveillance package that they're putting out, and it's being bought all over the world. They have major cell phone wires, cell phone lineups, a lot of industry. Their shipyards, of course, are very impressive. They've turned out an amazing amount of ships in a very short amount of time. So the Chinese kind of have the industrial basis, especially in this region, to really undercut anybody else, including places like the United States or Australia, or really anybody that would otherwise be bidding for these contracts. And you jump down here into the Democratic Republic of Congo. Once again, the Islamic State violence continues here in North Kivu, which is kind of a rural area over by Rwanda and Angola, I believe. Yeah, sorry, Uganda, Rwanda and Uganda. Angola is on the other side of the continent. The Islamic State is continuing their atrocities. They are really targeting a lot of Christian areas in this region, a lot of their villages, and they've killed at least a couple dozen people in the newest terror attacks, including local army and the neighboring Ugandan armed forces, who are currently operating and apparently assisting with anti-terrorism operations there. So they've destroyed the barracks of the Congolese army. They're seizing weapons and ammunition. When you're talking about the Islamic State, which has been battered into almost submission, I would say, in the Middle East by coalitions of multiple, much better military trained countries, including the United States, the focus has now shifted to Africa, where there's a lot less coalition support, and so it makes them a lot deadlier. It's almost too, like, the fighting between the Islamic State and any of these governments would be like the Central African Republic and the DRC going to war militarily. Like, it would result in about the same power level, essentially, if you really think about it that way. They're extremely powerful. They have a lot of backing. Personnel wise, they hold a lot of equipment, and but on top of this, Ugandans were ambushed. They ambushed the Islamic State apparently, but the local death toll for Christians is at least 20, if not more. Most of their houses and vehicles are burned. So basically, the Islamic State rolls into a village. If they don't take any hostages, they pretty much kill off any Christian population that's there, and then they burn their houses. They basically are. It's almost like Sherman's March to the Sea, except it's the Islamic State running around. It's pretty bad. So, and the Islamic State is definitely capable of taking on any of these countries' militaries conducting counterterrorism operations against them. They're pretty much equal in strength. Unfortunately, that's just the situation for most of the countries here in Africa. Jump over here into Port-au-Prince, Haiti. And 31 people were kidnapped by gang members. So there's an immense amount of violence. 38 people. I have misdone this title. 38 people were kidnapped here. And what this is, Port-au-Prince is seeing an immense amount of gang violence. And this kind of gang violence is really escalated to the point where not even the authorities can really keep control. Their military. Hundreds of people have been killed. Thousands are fleeing. It's when you want to talk about a gang war, it's a gang war. So since June 1st of 2021, Haitian authorities have lost control of the only road connecting Port-au-Prince to the southern half of the country, with a section of some 1.5 miles or 2 kilometers under the sway of the armed gangs. So that's a pretty significant thing. The slums, which is a lot of Port-au-Prince, unfortunately, are pretty much under their control. There's really not a whole lot that can be done, but they took 2 buses and kidnapped 38 people. We jump up into the United States, where the U.S. is intending to boycott the Russian Economic Forum, and this is coming from the Department of State. So they're saying that that there is no real business as usual with Russia when they're attacking Ukraine, is essentially what's going on. So they will not be attending the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum in any capacity. So no representatives are going out there, that's for sure. So you jump over into Idaho. We can see that political extremists were actually arrested here in Idaho. The Patriot Front, which is pretty much a pretty extreme right-wing sect of the U.S. population, were arrested during a pride event. And they were planning to disrupt the parade with riot gear that they had stacked in U-Haul trucks. And apparently federal officials were in the chat, or were actually in the chat undercover, and knew that they were going to attempt a diversion. They're currently looking at pressing charges such as conspiracy to riot. And take a look at this.
Hey, just stay off the grass. You guys can film as much as you want. Just stay off the grass, please.
What are they being arrested for?
Family member of theirs?
Oh, dude, I don't know. I don't think so. Dad? You in there? I don't think I'm in there.
So pretty good group of them.
Alright guys, solid stop by Idaho law enforcement. Check this out. These guys stopped a U-Haul full of dudes, masked up.
So that's like a 30-minute video, but pretty extensive arrest. So this is reportedly what they are going to be, or what they're under arrest for. So this is for inciting a riot, to organize, promote, encourage, participate in, or carry on a riot, commit any act of violence or furtherance of a riot, or to aid or abet any person to incite or participating in carrying on a riot or committing any act of violence in furtherance of a riot, which is exactly what this would be. So, pretty massive stop, nice work by federal and local officials. Pretty nice work, guys. Now, I'm okay. Listen, there's nothing wrong with having a difference in opinions, especially when it comes to politically. What is not okay in any sense of the word is extremism. I've fought against extremism, Islamic extremists in the Middle East, Khatib Hezbollah, obviously the Islamic State, which we talk about here on the channel constantly. There is a very big difference between having very strong views in whatever political stance you have. But there comes a level when there's extremism, and extremism is when you use that for really malignant means. I don't know if that's the correct term, but where you're trying to cause destruction and violence and stuff like that, and that is not something that I can agree with on any side, or the rhetoric to do so on any side. So that's about as political as it gets on this channel. At least when it comes to U.S. politics, I'm never going to go one side or the other when it comes to this. It's just, they're on both sides. There's extremism everywhere. It's just good to be knowledgeable about what that is and what the difference is between extremism and someone who just has their own political beliefs. So with that, we're going to move on to the actually good news of the day. A couple of different things regarding the internet and stuff like that. So we actually jump down here into the University of Central Florida's Creole. So basically what this is they are the optical, or basically they are the optics and the optics research lab, basically, for them, the electronics and optics research lab. And scientists learn how to transfer 400 gigabytes of data per second. First of all, if I had that download speed, I could download 100,000 films in a second. 100,000 full films in a second. Okay, do you know what kind of power that is? First of all, I don't have a hard drive that could fit that. But if I did, man. But anyway, basically this can improve data intensive internet applications. That really, you're talking about this optical wiring that's going through, that's kind of where internet's kind of going to, that fiber optic cables. And the improvement on those, and when you talk about video streaming, I mean, talk about the stock market. I mean, that amount of information per second in the stock market is invaluable. I mean, that means that you have an edge on every other person that doesn't have this. So this could change the economy. I mean, just look at that. So pretty crazy. Pretty crazy. But if you want to look at this more, you can go over to phys.org and take a look at that. They have some pretty cool information on it. So, but that's insane. I wish I had that download speed. You imagine the stream, if I could stream at 400 gigabytes a second, that would be insane. Anyway, we jump up here to Toronto, where actually the University of Toronto and the University of Waterloo made a breakthrough using tree bark. So basically, the researchers used wood-derived materials to build a small device that can be used to harvest electrical energy from everyday movements. So it's basically they demonstrate the use of these nanofibrils derived from tree bark, and they can be used to self-powered device capable of sending wireless signal to a smartphone via Bluetooth. So you can use tree bark, generate electricity from movement, and you can send a wireless signal via Bluetooth to your phone. It can be used to track biometric data such as heart rate, oxygen levels, or skin conductivity. I mean, that's a tree bark. Think about that. Tree bark. You can do all of this with tree bark? That is insane. That blows my mind. Let's take a look at this. Yeah, look at that. Literally tree bark. I mean, that's insane. I can't imagine. I never looked at a tree and said, "Hey, I could generate electricity with that." Like that blows my mind. This is the kind of stuff. This is the kind of leaps and bounds in technology that just absolutely blows you. Because who would think of that? Who would think of something like that? I certainly couldn't. There's no way. First of all, how did you get on the subject of doing this is my question, because there's got to be like a backstory to this. I just don't understand. But how did someone get on the topic of, let's see if we can turn tree bark into electricity and then see if we can send a Bluetooth signal to something? Like, how do you come up with that experiment? How do you engineer something to come up with that experiment? That just blows my mind. But that's pretty cool. But if you want to check it out, you can go to UToronto, basically News for Canada, which is the University of Toronto's website, and check that out. But a biosensor, man, not a tree bark. That fascinating. That is like Albert Einstein level genius right there. Congratulations to both of those research teams. I wish you very well in the future on that. But with that, that's actually all of the news going on in the world. Even though my mind may be completely blown, that is actually all of the news. And so I'll let you guys soak that one in as the last topic of the day for the rest of your guys' night and through tomorrow. Now, obviously, there's a lot of bad stuff going on in the news. I mean, black dots alone just represent the Islamic State. Red dots represent Russia. Obviously, we have fighting, we have arson, we have, extremism throughout the world. We have drought, famine, natural disasters. We have all sorts of stuff going on in the world, and that's affecting millions of people. With Ukraine being such a big topic, especially around the internet communities and news channels, everything else has been really drowned out, and it's a shame because while Ukraine is a big deal, and there's a lot of important stuff regarding Ukraine. I mean, we talk about it extensively on this channel, more extensively than everywhere else. There is other stuff going on in the world, and there are millions of people, tens of millions of people, that just aren't getting really the publicity or the attention they need. And a lot of that is because the humanitarian aid that was going to them was rediverted over to Ukraine for the humanitarian crisis that ensued following the war. And we want to be able to make a meaningful impact, not just in Ukraine. Well, certainly we want to make a meaningful impact there, but other places in the world. You guys have been an awesome community that has allowed us to do that, and I really couldn't appreciate you guys anymore. I couldn't thank you guys anymore if I even tried, and your continuous support has been amazing too. So please check out the description below, and please check out all of those different fundraiser links, not just for Ukraine. Those certainly do give that your attention too, but be sure to also check out those other locations. I'm talking about Africa, and I'm talking about Southeast Asia, and we're constantly looking for more. So join us on our Discord, ask us, let a staff member know if you have any charities or organizations, and that way we can go through and actually vet these, much like we have with the ones already listed, and we can hopefully get them put on here as long as they meet the criteria. And yeah, let's do some more good in this world. Let's be the news that gives back. The only way that works is with your guys' support in the community. And I thank you for the support you've already given us. And a big thanks to the staff who actually make this thing work. I literally just give my voice to this. They put in all the research. They're amazing. But if you can't give a lot to these fundraisers, give a little. And if you can't give anything at all, please give us a like and subscribe. It helps us reach more people who can come and enjoy the way we do the news here. And also, it means that more people will be here to help give back to the community. When we get large enough, when we can actually get monetized, we're never going to be doing super chats here. I have a full-time job. No, everyone here is volunteering. None of us are really expecting to be paid for anything. I know you can make a great career on YouTube, but I'd rather help people. So we're always going to have a fundraiser posted. There will never be super chats or donations to us as the new news on this. It will all be going towards helping people globally with the very news we talk about every day. So thank you once again for your support and continual support. Check out those descriptions. Join us on the Discord. And we will hopefully see you guys tomorrow. Please enjoy your Sunday. Please get some rest. I hope that you guys have the day off if you are working or have a job. I really hope that you guys have the day off and can relax. I hope that you, your family, and your friends remain safe. And if not, I really hope you find that safety and security in the near future. And hopefully, you guys will join us once again tomorrow for another 24 hours of news. And with that, my name is Paul from the New News. Thank you for joining us, and I will see you guys tomorrow night. Goodbye.